We're here with Bruce amongst a selection of recordings from the Golden Era. When these works were performed, what format were they recorded onto before post-production and the mastering onto disc, Bruce?
As a general rule, they were recording onto reel-to-reel tape recorders. Now, these weren't the reel-to-reel tape recorders that one had in the home as a domestic machine that all went at 3 3/4 inches per second. These were faster machines that went at 15 inches per second or 7.5, and they were big spools that you could never even fit onto the ones you had at home. The two speeds that were used for music were definitely 15 inches per second. Now, in modern terminology, that's 38 centimetres per second. Or there was 7.5 inches per second, which was 19 centimetres per second. Now, the faster the speed, the better quality that we had on a recording, and this was terribly important for classical music. Now, apart from the speed, the number of heads that these machines had to be more than what you normally got on a domestic machine at home. These machines had 3 heads. An erase head, of course, a recording head, of course, but a separate playback head, which enabled you as a recording engineer or people doing the recording to listen to the tape as you were recording the orchestra. This was important because if there were any technical glitches in your tape recording, then obviously you could alert the conductor to say, listen, we've had a problem, can you retake that passage again? So it's important to listen to the tape as you're recording it. And apart from that, in the stereo world, when stereo came in, we had to have an output volume control, or in broadcasting terms, they were known as faders. And the volume control had to be split into left and right. Now, in normal circumstances for stereo, both the faders were ganged together, and this is easy enough to achieve. The machines themselves, they were professional models. They were enormous, floor-standing models. One of the bigger companies that were used were the Studer machines, and they were Swiss, and they were operated, funnily enough, with a light bulb in. And if the light bulb went out, the whole thing stopped. So there you are. A simple light bulb makes analog recording, a tape recording, work properly. There were no belts, but they were well made.
And in the post-production, how were these pre-recorded tapes prepared for the mastering?
Well, in the analog days, they were then edited in a production suite, and people used razor blades. There was no digital recording in those days at all. Razor blades was to the fore. People used to mark the tape with a chinograph pencil and then cut it in a tape editing block, and these were readily available on the market from EMI or anywhere down Tottenham Court Road in those days, and this is how it was done. It was a technique, and it was certainly a craft used by the editors when they did this editing. Some music editing you can still hear. When you listen to a certain recording, you can hear some of these edits. And then after the editing was done, when retakes were put in, if there was a problem with an orchestra part or something, then the retake was edited in, and the whole thing was then listened to as a playback by the producers, just to make sure that everything was then in time for the suite and to be prepared to make a nice quality vinyl or a disc for you. And no one knew was any of the wiser that how long it took to actually do.
Do you think these recording techniques had anything to do with the fact people tend to call this the Golden Era?
Certainly, yes, from the technical point of view at least. Don't forget that analog editing with a razor blade was never 100% versatile as digital editing is today. Digital editing enables you to remix and add all sorts of things that weren't possible in the analog era under a razor blade regime. But in the analog days, you had valve equipment, you had valve mixing desks, valve tape machines, and these tended to produce a much warmer sound than digital can today. Some people may disagree, and if you listen to a digital recording today, then you might like it, but then you try and compare that with the same work with a recording made 50 years ago using valve equipment, and I think you'll notice the difference. Now, we're talking about the golden era here, and apart from the technical side, there were so many distinguished artists and celebrated personnel that did the recording around in those days, like, for instance, John Culshaw at Decca. We had Nathan Milstein and Leonid Kogan as two great violinists, and even someone perhaps like Maria Callas, who, don't forget, made a legend out of herself, producing recordings such as this for Columbia in the days of also Walter Legg. So there we have it. You've got, and I think this and everything else, this is what made the recording a golden era.